Most weight loss plans are one size fits all, not taking into account each person's individual needs. Noom is here to change that. Noom Weight uses psychology. That's why they say losing weight starts with your brain. But it also takes into account your unique biological factors, which also affect weight loss success. The program helps you understand the science behind your eating choices and why you have cravings. Everyone's journey is different, so your daily lessons are personalized to you and your goals. One of the great things about Noom is that it's nourishing instead of restrictive. They focus on progress instead of perfection. You don't have to give up carbs, or anything for that matter. Have cravings? Food FOMO? Noom can help you lose weight while still enjoying your favorite foods. To date, Noom has helped more than 5.2 million people lose weight. Stay focused on what's important to you with Noom's psychology and biology-based approach. Sign up for your trial today at Noom.com. That's Noom.com.
How do you feel when you switch to Geico and save on your car insurance? It's like going to work on one Thursday morning and thinking to yourself, just one more day until Friday. But then somebody in the elevator says, "Happy Friday!" Then you check your phone quickly and discover today's actually Friday. So yes, happy Friday, random stranger in the elevator. Happy Friday indeed. Yep, switching and saving with Geico feels just like that. Get more with Geico.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Great Plains Archaeology Podcast. Join me as we uncover the rich histories of North America's Great Plains, exploring the latest archaeological discoveries and past cultures that shape this storied region. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to episode 9 of the Great Plains Archaeology Podcast. I am your host, Professor Carlton Shield Chief Gover, and I am thrilled to have you join me on this exciting journey through the rich and fascinating histories of North America's Great Plains. So today, we're staying in the Archaic period. Last episode, we were talking about the early Archaic, in the Archaic period within this chronological framework in the Great Plains, roughly starting 7200 BC, ending roughly 500 BC, with that caveat that Archaic or Paleo-Indian lifeways of hunting and gathering, especially in the western part of the plains, the Rocky Mountain periphery, the high plains, Canada, stays the same. And that's that theme through the Great Plains in general. All the cultural and subsistence practices and changes we're really seeing in the east along the Missouri River Basin, along river basins in general. The high plains, right, that is bison hunting ground. It has low vegetation density. Its seasonality is does not have the breadth that it does in the east, right? The eastern part of the plains has a longer growing season. There's much more dense vegetation production, right? So keeping that theme and keeping that in mind, the Archaic period, 7200 BC to 500 BC, we talked about the early Archaic period in episode 8, really kind of talking about like, hey, there's some intensification of landscapes. People are building bison tribes. They're modifying the environments. They're doing, repeated use. We're starting to see boundaries. And I kept alluding to, in that last episode, something I really wanted to talk about. And that is moving away from looking at indigenous people in the past in the Great Plains at this period as like just on their hunting practices. I wanted to get into more ceremonialism, or what we think of as ceremonialism. That really starts to begin in the Middle Archaic. The Middle Archaic is roughly between 3800 BC and 1200 BC. Okay, so possibly one of the earliest forms of ceremonial structures that we see on the Great Plains is the medicine wheel. So hopefully this is ringing some bells for some people, like the medicine wheel. What are we talking about? So the medicine wheel, specifically the Bighorn Medicine Wheel in Wyoming, it is possibly Middle Archaic. And the reason that we're saying possibly, right, medicine wheels, specifically the one in the Bighorn Medicine Wheel, is made out of limestone. You can't radiocarbon date limestone, right? There's no organic material within a rock to date. Where we're getting this possible Middle Archaic point is that some of the projectile points that are found in association with the medicine wheel are from the Middle Archaic period. So we're using a relative dating technique of artifact seriation to identify the possible depth and time that the medicine wheel was constructed. Where are we talking about? So the Bighorn Medicine Wheel was located in the Bighorn National Forest on the western peak of Medicine Mountain at an elevation of roughly 9,600 feet in the Bighorn Range, which is east of Lovell, Wyoming. And this medicine wheel, it's not small by any stretch of the imagination. It is 75 feet in diameter. So from one end of the wheel to the other, 75 feet. And it has over 28 radial spokes. So you have, and I'm doing this for those watching on YouTube, or for those listening in their car or at home and not watching me on YouTube, I'm making a circle with my hands. There's the larger outer wheel, there's an inner wheel / cairn, and there's 28 spokes coming out of it. Now, why are people making this? These medicine wheels are not for hunting. You don't create these to trap bison, right? They're not like creating the bison drives, the bison lanes, developing corrals. This is very much separate from purely subsistence. Now we can go on and on about what could it mean. And that's very much looking at the meaning and symbolism of the medicine wheels. I don't want to get into that because I just want to talk about the archaeology. What is the physical evidence and how do we see this? And what does it mean? From a labor perspective, this is taking time and energy to create, right? Without a output or an expected return on calories, right? If we were to look at this from purely as human beings, as a biological organism, we have only a couple missions in life. That is number one is to recreate and procreate. And the way we do that is by consuming energy until that occurs. Medicine wheels are different. And this medicine wheel was used this isn't the only medicine wheel. There's between 70 and 150 that we know about between Wyoming, South Dakota, Montana, Alberta, Saskatchewan. This is very much a Northwestern Plains cultural phenomena that goes across time and space. Medicine wheels, the earliest ones seem to be showing up in the Middle Archaic, but they are used well into the 1800s AD. These places are continuously reused throughout thousands of years. They have significance to the indigenous populations that once had homelands, that still have homelands in those areas, and even immigrant tribes coming in, they were places of special significance. Now, of course, there's maybe some archaeoastronomy going in there, with archaeoastronomy being like how the archaeological record, works with astronomical alignments. You make any line in the ground, it's going to have some sort of astronomical alignment to it. So I don't want to get too much into archaeoastronomy, but really looking at that investment of space outside of just caloric return. This is different, right? This in the archaeological record in the Great Plains is a first, right? In the Paleo-Indian period, with peopling, we're really looking at stone tools and bones that things have been hunted. Up until this point, the archaeological record is subsistence. It is bison hunting, elephant killing, and butchering. Now we are seeing features, an archaeological feature, a feature being something that you cannot pick up with your hand. So a house is a feature, a doorknob would be an artifact, right? An artifact in the archaeological sense is something you can pick up with your hand, right? So we're starting to see features on the landscape. And I know I'm just repeating myself at this point. This can't be moved. And this is not for hunting. This is different. And so what does that mean? And we're continuing on those themes from last episode about the early archaic, investment into place. That these medicine wheels are reused over time. People or a person, like, they claim this is theirs. So we're seeing really, I don't want to say like borders being drawn, but we're starting to see like cultural specialization in the Northwest Plains, right? You don't find medicine wheels other places. Part of that is geography. Where do you have limestone? Medicine wheels are at high elevation. What's going on? And so we're seeing the presence and introduction of a culture in the Northwest Plains. And so the Middle Archaic things are starting to get fun. And the Middle Archaic in general, right? The Pleistocene megafauna are gone. This is the time of bison. This is, we're starting to see here with these medicine wheels, the possibility of regional, socially distinct populations. Right? Once again, people aren't, pots and points aren't people. But things like medicine wheels, these features that are specific to a geographic area where we can see overlap with some projectile point typologies, we can start making these arguments like, hey, there's a group of people up here that are creating medicine wheels for their own reasons that we're not seeing in Texas, we're not seeing in Kansas. This is special. And so this ties into conversations over, what are the antiquity of populations in places, and when tribes from those areas, like in Little Bighorn, the Crow, the Shoshone, can be like, we have always been here, where people have always used those medicine wheels. We can start seeing those arguments take shape, right? So this isn't like some lost, what were medicine wheels used for? Like I said earlier, tribes, indigenous nations, descendant communities from these areas have deep ties to those medicine wheels in their culture. And we can start seeing these vestiges of identity appear beyond, right, the bison kills. So that's why I really find the Middle Archaic to be interesting, because we have moved beyond just the hunter-gatherer kill count archaeology, and we're starting to see some more cooler stuff. But it's not just medicine wheels, right? I said there's between like 75 and 120 or something like that medicine wheels on the Great Plains, the Northwest Plains, 70 and 150. Sorry, I lowballed it there, between 70 and 150. They're significant. And, you can Google the Bighorn Medicine Wheel and it will pop up archaeoastronomy, that the spokes align to the solstices or other things. And that's just kind of going to happen. And I'm not going to make the determination that they are or not, right? That's not for me to decide. Some websites will be like, oh, there's 28 spokes, which is the same number of Lakotas built Sundance lodges. And it's like, Lakotas are, once again, late arrivals to the Great Plains. Let's not go that far. But even today, there's prayer offerings that are often left at medicine wheels, both at Bighorn and other places. It is a huge deal. So we start seeing those. I think they're really cool. We can date the one at Bighorn to possibly Middle Archaic because of the presence of some projectile points that are directly associated with the medicine wheel. And really, like I said, we can start seeing the possibility for regionally distinct social populations with very distinct cultures. I'm going to be right back with segment 2. We're going to continue on this conversation, looking at other parts of the plains where we're seeing other forms of investment of the landscape beyond just the hunting and gathering.
Most weight loss plans are one size fits all, not taking into account each person's individual needs. Noom is here to change that. Noom Weight uses psychology. That's why they say losing weight starts with your brain. But it also takes into account your unique biological factors, which also affect weight loss success. The program helps you understand the science behind your eating choices and why you have cravings. Everyone's journey is different, so your daily lessons are personalized to you and your goals. One of the great things about Noom is that it's nourishing instead of restrictive. They focus on progress instead of perfection. You don't have to give up carbs, or anything for that matter. Have cravings? Food FOMO? Noom can help you lose weight while still enjoying your favorite foods. To date, Noom has helped more than 5.2 million people lose weight. Stay focused on what's important to you With Noom's psychology and biology-based approach, sign up for your trial today at Noom.com. That's Noom.com.
And we're back talking about medicine wheels. So another one that I want to talk about real quick is the Majorville cairn and medicine wheel. This one is in Canada. Specifically, I think it's Alberta. Yeah, in Vulcan County, Alberta. This one is also dated to the Middle Archaic based on the presence of both oxbow and McKeon points. But there seems to be like no late Archaic artifacts associated with it. And the artifacts are found to the central cairn. So in the center of the ring here, there's a major cairn that's larger than the one at the Bighorn Medicine Wheels, with the cairn being this pile of rocks. And once again, 28 spokes, very similar to the Bighorn. It's also rather large. The central cairn itself, in the center of the medicine wheel, the diameter of that is 27 feet, which is then connected to a 27-meter cobble circle with 28 spokes. So 27 times 3 is roughly 81 feet in diameter for those who do their measurements in freedom. This is one of those, right? I talked about there's upwards of 150 medicine wheels. This one's in Alberta. Very similar, once again, dated to the Middle Archaic based on the presence of projectile points that are found there. This one has been used for ritual and ceremonial purposes by the Blackfeet in time immemorial. They still, like, same with like Bighorn Medicine Wheel, right? People are still going up there doing offerings. They're still doing ceremonial practices nearby. We're seeing very similar cultural practices occurring. Like the Middle Archaic, like I said, it's over a couple thousand years. When within the Middle Archaic, who knows? We can't accurately radiocarbon date these things, as I said in the first segment. But moving just beyond medicine wheels, I want to take a look at what's called British block cairn and its associated medicine wheel. So there's this regional pattern that we're trying to talk about here in the Middle Archaic that's kind of talking to the possibility of these discrete social units and cultural practices. So there's clusters at British block and British block cairn, also in Alberta. This is in Suffield block, Alberta, in Cypress County, Alberta. Now here, this is another Middle Archaic place. And the reason being there's only McKeon points found here. Oxbow and McKeon, those points, these are projectile point typologies. Oxbow points are found in a tight cluster in North Dakota, northern South Dakota, southeastern Alberta, where McKeon points are found in northern Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, and southwest Alberta. But there's overlap between McKeon and Oxbow points in south central Alberta and along the Montana-North Dakota border. And so here in Alberta, we're seeing at British block cairn just McKeon points, and there are clusters of 3 to 5 teepee rings here. So these aren't probably the teepees that we think of in terms of the large lodges. This is before horses, so these teepee poles or whatever structures are being probably carried by dogs. But also here, there's this medicine wheel that doesn't have spokes, but there is a human effigy. Like there's a person made of stone that's about like 3.5, 4 meters tall by 2 to 3 meters wide. It's different, right? It's not, there's a wheel there. You can see a wheel made out of the rocks, possibly with a cairn in the middle, but there's this person sitting in the southeast portion of it. What the hell does that mean? So this is different. And even though, we can date it to the Middle Archaic because of the presence of these McKeon points, whereas the other one we talked about, there's both Oxbow and McKeon points present. But the person just makes it so different. Like you can talk about the alignments with the spokes of the other medicine wheels, right? What is a human effigy doing here? That is different. That sticks out. That is something that needs to be investigated. But also, once again, this is a site that was used later in time too. So we know we can assume based on the presence of those McKeon points, Middle Archaic, but there's also associated with the site more modern or closer into time to us projectile points, as well as the presence of pottery. We haven't hit pottery yet, right? We're still this is pre-pottery. So this is different. And this is the differences that make the Middle Archaic interesting, right? And so just to wrap this up, we're just hit 3 fun sites, talking about medicine wheels, talking about investment of the landscape, moving these stone blocks around to create these features on the landscape that are not associated with hunting, but clearly, most likely some ceremonial context, right? We can look at the ethnographic record. These sites were used for ritual and ceremonial purposes. Closer to us, we can, reasonably assume in the past too. So who knows? These places are just significant. And that's why I wanted to take the time. This is kind of what makes the Middle Archaic pop in terms of archaeological research. And we're really looking at the Northwest Plains here, right? So this is like really one of the few times outside of bison hunting that we'll talk about Northwest Plains, right, in this podcast, just because of the nature of the archaeological record in the high plains, right? These practices from Paleo-Indian to woodland to Plains Village, Archaic, the Great, all through time, this is where people go to hunt. But something is happening in Northwest Plains where we start seeing borders of regionally distinct projectile point typologies, but now in the Northwest Plains, not only do we have like more distinct projectile point typologies, but these distinct cultural features in the presence of these medicine wheels and these cairns. This is unique. And this happens in the Middle Archaic. So with that, this is going to be a little bit of a shorter episode today. But the Middle Archaic, medicine wheels, investment in landscape. It's just a cool time. It's woefully understudied in Great Plains Archaeology. Great Plains Archaeology in general is like woefully understudied, but this in particular. So if you're ever out in the Northwest Plains, Wyoming, Montana, maybe in the summer, we're recording this in December, as we're thinking about those warm summer months and maybe taking some camping trips out to Montana, Wyoming, Alberta, keep your eyes out for some medicine wheel sites and go take a gander. These things are truly incredible things to look at. They're big. They're bigger than you'd expect. So I want to thank you all for listening today. I look forward to being with you guys next time. We'll talk about, I think we'll talk about some later cake stuff. We'll talk about, let's get into Nebo Hill. That's what we're going to do. Next episode, we're going to look at Nebo Hill and the late Archaic and some cool things that are going on. So until, see you guys all next time. Thank you for listening to the Great Plains Archaeology Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at Pawnee_archaeologist, and you can also email me at greatplainsarchpodcast@gmail.com. And remember, anybody can love the mountains, but it takes a soul to love the prairie. American author Willa Cather.
The Archaeology Podcast Network is 10 years old this year. Our executive producer is Ashley Airy, our social media coordinator is Matilda Siebrecht, and our chief editor is Rachel Roden. The Archaeology Podcast Network was co-founded by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle in 2014 and is part of Cultural Media and DigTech LLC.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.